Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Kellenberger. I'm the Director of Beach Operations for Walton County. Appreciate your time this afternoon. This is the Managed Vendor Program Committee meeting. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. If you have cell phones or any other devices that make noise, if you can cut them on vibrate or cut them off. If you have to take a phone call, please take it outside so as not to disrupt the meeting. Committee members, you have microphones in front of you. If they're green, they're on. If they're red, they're off. Keep that in mind. This meeting is being recorded, both video and audio. The committee members are Chip Coble, John Reichenbeck, Philip Poundstone, Tim Norris, and Lee Moore. And they were selected because of their involvement in the community in various committees or associations, and we appreciate their commitment. This will be a fairly short-lived committee. We plan to have 2 meetings in which we will develop and define the terms and conditions of the agreements for this managed vendor program that is in the format of a cooperational program with the vendors. In a previous email, I had discussed a format of this meeting that we would do committee comments and then public comments. After rethinking that, I think that once we do a little startup action here with the committee, that we'll take public comments first, and then we'll have committee comments where we'll start to develop the actual terms and conditions of these agreements. The document that I've sent out as a agenda purpose of meeting document is on the table here. If anybody would like a copy of it, so you can sort of follow what we're going through. And my position here is a liaison. I'm sorry I didn't introduce Sydney Noyes, our county attorney. Jay Tusa in the audience with us, and Melanie Walters, our AV specialist and beach code enforcement admin.
Just real quick, I want to add to Brian's comments. So as a committee for the BCC, you are subject to sunshine laws, and so, stand back a little bit. You are subject to sunshine laws, and so make sure your comments here today in a public forum are certainly appropriate, but do not talk to your fellow committee members outside of a public forum as like this meeting. So I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that. Sydney, you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think most of you have actually, except for Mr. Coble, probably have served on a public board before. Sorry, I can't tell if I'm making the, okay. So the main thing, like Jay was saying, is that you want to be careful that if you see each other outside of these meetings, that you don't discuss any business that would come before you as a committee, which I think, given the fact that this is going to be such a short-lived committee, that really shouldn't be a problem. But if any of you guys have any questions or concerns about that, please feel free to contact me. Also, really important, if you have any notes or anything that you're going to take as part of your work on the committee, we are going to collect those so we can preserve them as public records. You certainly do not have to make notes. If you don't need them, don't worry about it. But if you do make any notes, we'll need to make sure that we collect those and preserve them.
And on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, I'd like to thank you for your service on this committee.
Great. Okay, first item of business is we'll operate this committee under Robert's Rules of Orders. So we need to elect a chair. I don't believe we need a vice chair since we only have 2 meetings and everybody here is committed to both meetings. We'll do it by self-nomination.
Be chair.
Okay.
That's okay with you guys.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Appreciate it. Tim?
Well,
You're now chair. Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah.
All right. Tim, if I may, I can go through the narrative of this.
If you would, yeah.
Okay. All right. So part of the process we go through every year, the beach code revision process, a managed vendor program has come up and received some consideration but never been fully voted on or approved by the Board of County Commissioners. This year, the BCC decided that something needed to be done in the form of some managed vendor program, and it has moved towards what we have called a cooperational or a co-op program. And Philip Poundstone with the South Walton Beach Service Association submitted a draft copy of a plan. John Reichenbach with South Walton Community Council also had a very good outline of what that council would like to see on the beach. Chip Coble, being a longtime vendor on our beach, obviously had good insight into it. Lee Moore's on our Destination Improvement Committee and is very well versed in what we're striving to do on the beaches and in the public spaces. And Tim Norris is, of course, on our Tourist Development Council. So all the members were selected because of their position. Philip is also on our Beach Management Committee, which helps to develop our policies concerning all beach management situations. So all the people were selected because of their positions in the community and their desire to make or create harmony on the beach. So this program has two components. It has an agreement between Walton County and the South Walton Beach Service Association. And then the second component is the service agreement between the South Walton Beach Service Association and any vendors that would like to participate under the managed vendor program. And that's where it gets the name co-op program, because it's a cooperational effort by the vendors to work under a master agreement by the third party entity of the association. And so our goal here today is to develop the terms and conditions, scope of work, as you might say, for those agreements. Primarily the agreement between the county and the association. But since the sub-agreement will be integral to it, we also need to get into that as well. So in this document that I gave you, it has an outline that is similar to what I had put together over previous years as components of a managed vendor program. And the last item on it refers to the document that the South Walton Community Council has submitted to the Board of County Commissioners, as well as Tourist Development Council and our other sub-advisory committees. And it's included here. It's called Managed Vendor Program. And I've also included the draft copy of the SWBSA service agreement. That would be the document between the association and the vendors that would like to participate in the co-op program. So our mission today is to develop this outline into a more defined form, terms and conditions, and then get into the terms and conditions of the agreement between the association and the vendors. And so anybody that's been through the sub-advisory committee meetings and the Tourist Development Council meetings and the various BCC meetings probably understands most of the components of it. I think today it'd be prudent for us to take any public comments prior to doing council comments where we start to develop the outline. The general terms and conditions of the agreement will of course be provided by Walton County Legal Department, and they are basically what we call our boilerplate that includes insurance and all that kind of stuff.
And we have a draft contract with all of the terms, those general terms, other than the scope of services that Brian was talking about. And that really goes into what we need y'all's help with, how many attendants we're gonna have, what are gonna be the hours of service, things like that. But we do have a draft of that contract if you got, and it's draft, it's not final, but if you think that that would be helpful, we can make sure that you all get copies today.
Yeah, and there's not much leeway on those.
No, there's not a lot of leeway on most of that, but there may be some things in that contract that you would want to address that we've already addressed. Mm-hmm. So it could be helpful for you guys to look at that, and we will certainly provide you a copy.
Okay, so with that being said, Tim, I mean, first, is there any comments on what I've just said? Any other ideas of what could be done differently, or everybody in agreement with the format of the meeting and?
Format's fine with me. I just say as chair, just since it's under Robert's Rule of Order, just, you don't have to ask the chair to speak, just be courteous to your constituent up here, and, you know, once they're finished, then you can start.
Good deal.
Okay? That's it.
Okay, we can open up with public comments.
Just public comment, any public comment? Mr. Brooke? State your name.
Bob Brooke, B-R-O-O-K-E. First, I'd like to just note my approval and applaud the Board of County Commissioners for convening this committee to look at a serious problem. I think I also would like to commend Mr. Poundstone for his efforts in putting together a plan for how to solve the problems that seem to cause a lot of difficulty with people who spend time on the beach, especially at the public accesses, or the regional accesses, because I'm under the assumption that this plan is focused strictly on the regional accesses. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I had a question about how the arrangement with the association is going to be conducted. I'm under the assumption that the county, by either state or county procedure and process, is required to compete any kind of contracts that they award.
Is required to what? I'm sorry.
To compete, to have contracts awarded competitively. You don't
Right.
sole source contracts.
If money's exchanged, yes.
Okay, so does that apply to any arrangement if there's money exchanged with the association?
If there's money exchanged, yes.
Okay, do you have time? My experience is with the federal government, and their policy is all contracts should be competitive. However, they have about 14 exceptions to why they don't have to be competitive. One of them is urgency or timeliness. Do you have any similar?
So the Florida statutes govern our procurement policies. Usually there's a threshold. You know, if it's less than $50,000, it doesn't have to be competitively bid. If it's a capital improvement projects over a certain amount, they have to be competitively bid, both the design and the construction. There's a lot of rules that govern it, but basically if we are just entering into an agreement and there's no exchange of money, there's no requirement that there be competitive bidding.
Do you anticipate this will involve exchange of money and will require competitive bidding?
It's my understanding that it wouldn't.
At this time, there is no consideration for exchange of money. The county's interest is to create some control over the public beaches in regards to vending.
This is for the pilot program we're speaking now, or are we talking about
Correct.
the follow? This is strictly for the pilot program.
Correct.
Okay. My second comment is, I believe it was voted on at the county commissioners meeting on Tuesday that there will be 2 sites for pilot programs. Is that correct?
There was instruction,
Yeah, it came in the form of direction and also in the form of what I would call desire. So
Yeah, actually, I think it was also brought up
wasn't
at the
voted on
previous
as-
meeting
Yeah.
as well. So,
Mhm.
but that's the intent. There'll be 2 sites.
So, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but at the county commission meeting, at least one of the commissioners expressed interest that we explore 2 different regional beach access to have the managed vendor program. So I mean, that's certainly the direction from the board, and you guys should consider that in your plans.
And I don't think it was the same commissioner that had expressed that same desire at the previous meeting. It was a different commissioner.
Yeah, I would say that our requirement here today is we're offering up a committee recommendation. And so all aspects of this would be considered a recommendation to the BCC.
Well, what I would like to recommend, assuming there are 2 sites, that you, and their pilot programs, to explore 2 options. One would be Mr. Poundstone's proposal for the South Walton Beach Service Association to manage one of the sites, and at least to offer at the other site the option for each vendor who's interested in vending at that site to perform the same function in a sense, to self-police, following the same rules. You may not get any takers, which would be good to know, but I think you ought to at least give the beach vendors the opportunity before they decide to enter in to find out whether they want to, or give it a trial to see whether they want to independently perform the same function following the same rules as the beach service agent would do.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. And actually, by default, the other regional beach accesses that won't be included in the pilot program have that opportunity.
Will they be required to follow the same rules, though, in the other beach accesses?
That could actually be part of our recommendation to the BCC, that we implement the same rules on the other regional beach accesses. However, I'm not sure if they'll take that, but I think that
Well,
could
one
be,
or the other. I mean, your counter suggestion would
Yeah.
work if they follow the same rules, but if they
But
don't,
part of
you
the
probably
problem
want
is-
to do it as a pilot
yeah,
program.
Part of the problem is a contractual entity or a contractual agreement takes two entities. If you go into more than three entities, you're getting into a situation where you're really not achieving the goal of a contractual agreement. See what I'm saying? Like, in other words, the reason we're doing it with South Walton Beach Shore Association is because it's agreement between the county and that association. It's two entities that have decided to work under terms and conditions. If you do it with more than one entity, so if we said, okay, everybody that wants to vend under the program you're talking about enters into an agreement, then we have either 7 or 8 or 9 or how many people want to play different agreements, or we don't have any agreement at all. And that's why I was saying, by default, the other regional beach accesses have the opportunity. In other words, to act a certain way doesn't mean that there has to be rules and regulations to act that way. See what I'm saying?
Well, all I'm saying is on the second pilot program, one is entirely, the agent is a single agent, and that's the service. The other pilot program on the second beach that's designated would be open to have any vendor sign the same agreement and follow the same rules. However, my personal feeling is, and I anticipate, you'll get very few vendors who want to send somebody and have them stationed on the beach all day long, every day.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to
But
make.
I think you ought to give them the option or the opportunity to try that.
But, okay, so.
That's my, it's just, give them the opportunity. I think it'll turn out that you'll only have one person, one agent or one agency or one organization reply.
I think that because of the terms and conditions, the general terms and conditions of what you have to be and do to enter into an agreement, probably makes everybody not, qualified to do that. And then, like I said, if you have 6 or 7 or how many different agreements with however many vendors want to do that, that really gets into defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do, is just keep it with one person.
Right,
And-
because the idea is to have the managed vendor, so
Right,
we
and
have a lot of different
Right, and the second
entities.
part I'm trying to make about that is that the vendors have that opportunity to do that on the other regional beach accesses. You don't have to have a set of rules and regulations to act right.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to find anyone that's going to voluntarily put an agent all the time, full-time every day on the other beach access or any beach access. They don't now.
I don't know, 2 years ago, I didn't think I'd have an entity stand up and do a co-op program. And now I do. See what I'm saying? I've always had the attitude that the industry needs to self-regulate, or otherwise the county will create regulations that may not be in their best interest, but are in the best interest of the community. And so my premise on this is that I agree with what you're saying, is to give the vendors the opportunity to do what we consider acting right in the best interest of all concerned is, and there doesn't need to be an agreement on these other beaches. If they would like to act within the same terms and conditions that we've set forth in these two particular beaches, they certainly have that opportunity to do that. And it would be set a very good example of that industry or those other members of when I say industry, I'm talking in generic term, I'm not talking as association. It'd be a very good opportunity for them to show that, hey, county, we can act responsibly, or how you have outlined that a beach ought to be acted upon responsibly. See what I'm saying? You don't have to have a set of rules and regulations to do what is right.
Well, you are making rules and regulations. I mean, you have a sort of a,
And so
you're
so
going to have a set of rules and regulations to affect or put into effect Mr. Poundstone's plan, which I applaud. I don't have any problem, personally don't have any problem with it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can say we're not going to put rules and regulations on the vendors, because you are.
I don't mean abolish all rules and regulations. I'm just saying that they have the opportunity to act responsibly without having a new set of rules and regulations put down on them. And I'm talking about in the instance that you're talking about, or try another beach that's not contracted with the South Walton Beach Service Association.
But what are you going to ask them to do on that beach?
I'm going
Are you going to ask them to
I'm going to do exactly what you suggested, and that is see if they can operate within the rules and regulations similar to this agreement.
So you are going to ask them to have someone there 7 days a week from 8 to 5?
No, I was saying by default that can be done, because anybody can operate. They don't have to have a set of rules and regulations to do what is considered responsible vending. If they want to prove to the county they can do that, they certainly can go out and do that. In other words, they can start acting like that. They don't have to say, they don't have to have an agreement between me and you, or between the county and them. They can say, Mr. County, we're going to show you that we can vend responsibly, and we're not going to leave our sets out there all day unoccupied.
So are you saying then that you, on the beach, if the vendors do that, you will not require the kind of situation that Mr. Poundstone has described?
I'm countering your argument.
Yeah, well, I don't see a rationale in your countering argument. But that's two sides to at least two sides to every issue.
Okay.
Okay. The third item was the idea of people walking up to a vendor and renting at the time they're on the beach, rather than making a reservation to have the vendors deliver something to the beach. You know, where I'm from, in Maryland, Ocean City, Maryland, the Jersey Shore, Jones Beach, New York, the typical way to rent beach equipment was you had a vendor sitting there on the beach with a store of equipment, and when you wanted to go to the beach and rent equipment, you walked up to the vendor and said, I'd like to rent 2 chairs and an umbrella, and would you put them over there for me? Suppose we have visitors that want to do that, or locals for that matter. How do you handle that? Or how would you propose to handle that?
Well, the way I think it'll be handled is the vendor association has the ability to take forms of payment on demand, be it the little module you add to your phone or whatever, and they have developed a mechanism of rotation for the participating vendors on that beach. Say you have 5 vendors that have decided to participate under the umbrella master agreement. Then there's a rotation process. So vendor 1 gets the first customer that walks up, vendor 2 gets the second customer. And that is the importance of having the vendor association attendant be impartial. In other words, be employed by the association and not be a employee of any one of the 5 vendors. 5 I'm using in generic form.
Okay, I like that idea. In fact,
Yeah.
when Mr. Poundstone and I discussed his plan, that was one of the things we discussed. It's not in the original plan, so that would be in addition to the plan as it existed about 2 weeks ago.
The reality is that most of the people
Rent in advance.
purchase rent or chairs online or phone call to master or to main office or whatever. And they have the service agreement has a mechanism that allows for the association attendant to understand which of the participating vendors has rentals already paid for. And of course, those participating vendors instruct their vendee to notify the attendant when they get there, and their equipment will be set out. And when they leave, notify the attendant, we're leaving for the day, and the attendant pulls equipment in.
Yeah, the only thing with the walk-up rentals would be additional storage.
So that they
More
also,
than most
they
likely.
also have a mechanism of, being able to monitor inventory. And I would assume that would mean having some extra sets there. Obviously there'll be limited storage, and they'll have to manage that on-beach storage inventory. I would assume that weekly they'll be subtracting and adding chairs to the boxes. And included in that would be an overage, if you will, of anticipated walk-ups.
It could even be daily for that matter. You'd have changes in the inventory.
Yeah, and it could be done daily. I mean, we know that there'll be some working, some on-the-job training, so to speak, of how to manage the inventory on a daily, weekly basis.
That's what a pilot program is for.
Exactly.
And we as an association board have discussed everything you've talked about at length. I'm sure as we progress in the committee discussion, we can share all of that.
Great. Thank you very much for the time.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't want to deprive anybody of their time in speaking publicly, but we are on a time constraint. We have a hard out at 4 o'clock. There was a planning meeting in this room at 4 o'clock. So just want everyone to be aware, we have an hour and a half.
Duly noted. All right.
Okay.
Any other comment from the public? All right. Anybody here on the board want to make a?
I just wanted to make a comment that I do appreciate that everyone applauds that I came up with this, but we have a board, and on that is Dave with La Dolce Vita and Heather with Live Well 30A. The three of us equally have come up with this plan. We have met twice in the past 2 weeks for a few hours each time to dive into this more and come up with details. So I think every single issue that we discussed, we can give a educated answer as to what we are thinking and why, because we have gone through every scenario that we can think of. So just wanted to put that out there. And they're both in attendance here.
Thank you.
And I'll chime in. I think the SWCC would still prefer our program that we outlined. However, in the spirit of seeing where, the desire of, I think, commissioners and Brian and the work that Philip's been done, we would, and the fact that it's a pilot program, we would, clearly go along with that. But I would like to just hand out here sort of some of the key, and these aren't the details to every last little thing, but sort of what we see as sort of the key elements to the key issues that we think are critical to be included.
Chip, you get one?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that you have one.
To be included in a program like this. And I know Philip, I'm sure, has covered a bunch of these, but there's also, I think, some detail work that, I'd at least like to hear about. And I don't know whether you want to go through this or people.
What are your main points that you?
Well, I think number one, on the organizational structure, I guess a little bit back to Sydney, what is the entity? What's the legal authority, to operate? What's their liability operationally? How they're going to manage the vendors? Those sorts of the nuts and bolts of it. Mm-hmm. How many vendors are behind this proposal and are willing to participate? Are all the vendors in the program required to join the organization? We hear not, but then the question is, well, why wouldn't they be required if they're going to be a service level agreement within the organization, as well as a top agreement from the county to the organization?
You want to address each one of these that you bring up at a time, one at a time? Chris, you have something?
I was just going to say that maybe the reason all vendors aren't on board is I'm not sure that all the vendors are on board, are necessarily on board with the South Walton Association. I appreciate their efforts, but anyway.
And to make a comment about that, I have been in every single one of these meetings for 3 years. I've been on Beach Management Committee. I have spent countless hours trying to get vendors to participate, sending out emails to every single vendor there is. I get absolute crickets other than 2 individuals that step up. We therefore have created a system that solves a lot of the issues that Mr. John and other concerned locals bring up, while at the same time not discriminating against a single vendor. And it does not benefit any of the three of our companies whatsoever over anyone. So my statement to that, and I certainly respect Mr. Chip and his experience, and I think he brings a lot to this committee, so don't hear it any way other than that. But I have yet to see anybody provide any other solution whatsoever other than let's go to the BCC meetings and hopefully nothing will change. And as we all know, that's not possible.
Sorry, go ahead, Chip. Did you have more you wanted to add?
Just that I believe a lot of the problems that are occurring at these regional accesses, as far as the vendors are concerned, might be created with the by a lot of the same vendors that are anyway. I guess I'll just
and I don't usually get involved in the discussion, so you guys can tell me to be quiet if I step out of bounds. But Chip, do you think that this is something that once it's established at least one regional beach access, that maybe some of the vendors will get on board, or?
I'm just afraid it could be opening a can of worms, so to speak. I mean, depending on the regional access, the ones that are going to be implemented in. You could have, Company A signing contracts with non-Gulfront entities to provide 75, 100 sets of chairs. You could have Company B signing a contract with a non-Gulfront entity to do the same thing. You could have Company C renting beach equipment through apps on the phone. I can see where the regional accesses and the beaches that the Walton County public like so much, and the problem that we're trying to fix could get exponentially worse.
Well, so maybe, and I don't know if this is something that you guys have considered, but maybe one way to address that, to make sure that that you don't have these exclusive contracts, is just that chairs are set up on a first come, first served basis, and they can't be reserved in advance.
And that's exactly how it reads right now.
Yeah, there are mechanisms to mitigate the issues you just described. One of the main ones is maximum number of sets on the described beach area. Okay, that's going to take some coordination effort between people that are included, that have decided to participate in the vendor program on that regional beach access. But the problems you talked about would exist without a program. In fact, you would have no control over it without a program. See what I'm saying?
Right.
And the only thing that would counter that is the exponential growth formula, where things ramp up, and then flatten out based on the ability of that environment to service that population.
I'd like to follow up on Philip, and believe me, I understand the efforts of trying to get people to be involved and get committed. The practical question, however, if people respond to an email, how are you going to get the vendors to read and execute and understand these service agreements that we're going to ask the vendors to sign on behalf of the association?
So I can answer that for you.
Yeah.
That service agreement, and I've shared that with Mr. Bryan, and we've expanded a little bit since then, the only discrimination there is whatsoever is if you do not pay your portion of the attendant. You submit a form, and I think we need to back up a little bit, that we just understand, I know time is getting away from us. We have a direction from the commissioners of where we want to go. We, therefore, the three of us as the board of the association, have come up with a plan that we think works. I think we need to go through that and say, yep, this is good, no, this is not good, and we work through that. But the entire intent is we created the most simple agreement that every single vendor, where they have been doing business currently, can continue to do business. The reason why we have not gone to, we're bidding it out to one person, we're doing a lottery or whatever the case is the 5 people that currently sit on the commission seats right now, they enjoy and they represent small business, and they do not want the various vending companies to lose their business if that were to happen. If that was not the case, none of us would be sitting here and we wouldn't be coming up with this association plan. So, with that being said, Mr. John, our goal as an association is it's as simple, plain as day, and it actually makes the job for that vendor easier. That they read this 2-page agreement that basically says the only way you can't vend on this beach is if you don't pay your bill for your allotment of sets that you used. And it actually becomes easier because you bring your set down there, the attendant sets it out for you when your customer arrives, and they break it down for you after your customer leaves. It is simple as that. There's someone on site at all times that drops the umbrellas when a storm's coming through, that greets your customer. We're going to train them. They're going to be background checked. They're going to have drug screening. We're going well above and beyond to vastly improve the current customer experience that we're having right now on Walton County beaches. And I assure you, there is not 1 ounce of discrimination to any vendor at all. And the reason why it's such a beautiful thing, that 3 of us that are all technically competitors have worked together to develop this. And sure, someone may argue we're 3 of the bigger companies out there. That just means we have a vested interest to participate and make sure it doesn't harm our business. And we know we have to take care of the guy who has 25 sets and he's a one-man show.
So what's your oversight capacity? How are you gonna, control and make sure quality control,
Sure.
all that kind
So
of
the
stuff?
3 of us create a plan, and this is why a pilot is good, is because we're going to be able to set procedures of how our hiring happens, doing the background, doing the drug screening, who is this individual, okay? We're then going to give them training of how they treat it. We have systems and procedures in place of company X places an order through an online system that is easy as can be. It's a form submission that Heather created that goes out to all vendors who have, all they have to be is a permanent Walton County vendor who signs this agreement. And trust me as a vendor, and I'm trying to make money and someone calls me and says, I want to set at Ed Walleen, and I've never really been part of the association. If I set up at Ed Walleen last year, I'm going to get a piece of paper and I'm going to sign it so I can collect my money from my customer. So we are extremely vested, and that's where when we go through all these details, I believe everyone on this committee and the public will see that we've thought of every single thing there is, and I genuinely think that everyone's going to agree for the most part that the plan we've come up with is reasonable, and the 3 of us are certainly all ears of ways to improve it, or if there's a rebuttal that is not good for concerns that you may have, we're certainly all ears to come up with a better way. But we have, for hours, gone through every detail we can think of.
So, can I make a comment, Tim? I don't necessarily think that John and Chip were questioning the simplicity of the arrangement or ease of following it once it's entered into.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that more of the question I was hearing, and I have a huge question, is what is the motivation to get vendors to do it in the first place? And how will it work if you have some vendors who are and some vendors who
Sure.
aren't? So I think we've got, the way I'm looking at it, I think we've got 2 different situations. We've got a pilot program situation this year, but the whole point of a pilot program is to lead to a more holistic implemented solution for everyone, right? So I think maybe some of us have some questions about how that would even work as to whether the pilot program, and I'm not saying it's not worth it, but you've got to have that somewhat of a comfort level or a confidence level that it's going to lead to something that will work for across the entire situation. So I am, and I think I may be missing something here as far as when you say that a vendor can still do business out on those beaches but doesn't have to join. That's where I'm struggling, because or join / sign the agreement. Do they have to be a member to sign the agreement? And if they're not a member but they sign an agreement, they're still going to pay into it. So I think that's an important distinction, is to talk about what membership in the actual association really means. And And then is that part of the plan? Like on the, let's just focus on the pilot program at the moment. Whichever 2 beach accesses that get selected, is that the only way to do business on that beach, is to enter into this agreement? And then does that translate into, if, let's say this works and it goes into next year and gets implemented everywhere, is that still the rule? Because I think that's one point of confusion I might be hearing.
All right, so you sort of answered your question. So, let me back up just a little bit with, 2260A policy states that the Board of County Commissioners has ability to regulate vendors, type, location, all that. That's exactly what we're doing here. That was the impetus of the managed vendor program. All right, and so to answer the question, what motivates the vendor to participate in this program? They simply can't vend on that beach unless they decide to enter into the sub-agreement with the association. And the reason we have it set up as a master agreement with one entity, and then they have sub-agreements with the vendors that want to participate, is so that we have one entity accountable for activity on that beach. And we have a set of terms and conditions or rules and regulations of how the master agreement entity can operate on that beach. And the rules that they have in their sub-agreement include our rules. Okay, so the sub-agreement, those rules convey over into their sub-agreement, and they also have a few other additional ones, which is really the terms and conditions of the payment. And so what they have developed is a unit price per chair. And so there's 100 chairs on that beach. Vendor A has 10 chairs. Then their responsibility is 10% of the cost for the entity to manage that beach. And they bill them on a monthly basis. They have a grace period to pay the bill. If they don't stay current, then they have become in default of the sub-agreement. They're no longer allowed to vend on that beach. It's going to take, since this will be part of the new vending code, 2260, we'll have the ability to help where vendors are not wanting to act within that section of the code. We have the ability to get them off the beach or impose fines or whatever. So that, to answer your question, what's the motivation? That's the motivation. You simply can't provide service on that beach unless you have included yourself in the program by signing the service agreement of the term and agreeing to the terms and conditions of that, which include the terms and conditions that the association has agreed to with the county. When it moves on to the next regional beach accesses, that carries on to those. So does that answer the question of the motivation? And so the reason that people aren't required to be a member of the association is because legal determined that you can't do that. Second is we want participation in the program. Philip would like to have more participation in the association, but the Phillips vending company and the other vending companies came to the realization that there would be another program installed on the regional beaches that would quite possibly preclude them from vending on the beach. And so whenever they all figured that out, they came up with this plan that allows inclusion, and it doesn't cost anything. It has no requirements other than the agreement to abide within those daily operational beach activities and to pay a fair unit price of your participation level.
So I think clarity is important. So this is a huge change. So I think we need to be careful. When I say we, I mean anybody that's involved in this in any way, in saying, but you don't have to be a member of the association. That is technically correct, but I don't want to give vendors out there the impression that, well, they can just keep operating as usual and still be okay within all of this, because really what this sounds like to me is just regulation by the county once removed. Really, we've got, and I'm not saying this in a critical way at all. It's you know, it may very well work really well, but I think communication about this is pretty critical. So, because that sounds to me like, you know, eventually, and let's just talk about the whole program if it gets implemented beachwide, you know, you really do. You have to enter into this contract. It doesn't matter if being a member of the association or not. That's a whole other issue for that board to deal with. But they have to sign this contract and they have to abide by it. So it's almost like signing a contract with the county as a vendor. It's just a little bit different structure. So I think that's important, and that makes it much clearer to me. So I think it will make it much more clear to a lot of other folks as well.
How many vendors, beach vendors do we have for that that have setups
Total.
total?
Last year, we had approximately 380.
But those are all vendors.
Yep, permitted beach vendors. I'm sorry, permitted, or permits. There was, how many, Melanie, was there individual vendors? 185. And so obviously some vendors have more than one permit, and not all of those are beach equipment vendors. You know, we had a strong push 2 years ago to get everybody that offers goods and services on the beach to be a permitted vendor. So some of those are photography and all that. I don't have the breakdown of who are equipment vendors, but
Do we
I
have
can
any
get that.
idea?
Last I saw, what I think Melanie gave me a list, I think it was like 45 or 50
So then,
pure chairs and umbrellas.
Okay.
But then you gotta break that down to who vends on public beaches.
Yeah.
Versus
Right.
just private.
Exactly, you know, cause you have the Rosemary's, the Seasides, I don't believe Mr. Coble really vends on public beaches too much.
Not anymore. No,
So-
and I would argue that we are beach services as opposed to vendors. I mean, it is possible now with these iPhones for someone visiting the beaches of South Walton to pull up on their Apple phone a number and book a set of chairs with a company in Nashville or Birmingham or Atlanta, make payment over the phone. The company that's not here in South Walton has contracted with someone to go put out a set of chairs because we've got it, it's been rented. And there's, you know, I mean, that's the vendor. And in a lot of cases, the person setting up the beach has no motivation to make sure the guest is not sitting 7 rows back with chairs and umbrellas on either side of them. They really have no vested interest in making sure that the folks have a good stay and come back. There are beach services such as myself who avoid the regional accesses now, just simply because there is no room. There are folks who have contracted to put out dozens of sets of chairs for non-Gulfront property owners, and this particular regional access is the closest one for us to service in the morning. So we're gonna go out there and throw out and take care of our 60 seasonal sets that we've committed to.
But our solution fixes that problem.
It does, but I'm not so sure that
It completely fixes it as a human being comes to the beach.
yeah.
They get their chair put out, those individuals leave the beach, they get it put up.
And I'd like to maybe even consider where the accesses are that we're signing over county beaches to you know, vending operators and vending operations that in some cases, like I say, they're not even in Walton County, don't have a vested interest in any of it except for the money they're gonna generate renting. But,
Well, that's one of our goals today is
I'd like to see maybe for, you know, X number of dollars per set that goes out, say at Edwall Inc. Be paid by the company whose equipment is on the beach to the county, to the citizens of Walton County.
well, right now, we're not, the county's interest is not in revenue generation. It's in gaining, some control
Sure.
over the beach.
Well, I kind of wonder if you know, if you were having to pay every day to put that set out there, that it might not discourage. It looks real good to your bank account in January to get hundreds of checks from out-of-state homeowners for seasonal sets of chairs and umbrellas that you're going to commit to put out on a county beach. Personally, I never have done that. If it there was, I just, that seemed to be overstepping every bounds that there might be. I don't know legally, but morally and ethically, I think it does. But it does look good to your bottom line. And I just think that, you know, if you're getting that check in January, well, if you know you might have to pay the county $2 or $3 a day every day that you do that set during the busy part of the summer, maybe it takes a little bit of the luster off that penny, so to speak, or it makes them rethink that business scheme. Like I said, I don't know. I've just about quit operating on the regional beach accesses just because it's gotten to be such a mess.
Could that not be part of the qualitative selection / evaluation process of who the vendors that are, like, you know, enter in a service agreement? I don't know, Tiffany, where that would be.
I'm sorry.
Whether that would be discriminatory practice, but like these companies from Atlanta or Birmingham that take the order and then, you know, subcontract with some guy to put it on the beach who's not really even based here.
The only way you would be able to do that is if you said no new, because to my understanding, and I know exactly who Mr. Chip is speaking about, to my understanding, they do not have a vending permit right now. So you would just have to say no new vendors, but again.
I would say that everybody that we receive applications for has a address either in Walton County, maybe a neighboring county, but I don't think we have anybody that is basically a call center in a neighboring state.
And I don't think so either, but there is a company or two that is trying to do that, trying to just be an app-based business. We don't participate with those companies, but I don't think that they've.
And technically, you know, if you're contracting with someone to go deliver chairs and umbrellas, you know, is that person that's delivering them, they're not technically vending them. Like I said, I don't know. I just think we want to be real sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's and don't end up giving away our regional beach accesses. And
yeah, I think we're doing exactly
to the point where
I think we're doing exactly the opposite. I think what Walton County has decided to do is develop a managed vendor program that does not take away opportunity for Walton County businesses. I understand what you're talking about, these call centers. I don't think we have that. I'll go back and look at our permits we've gotten so far and see. I understand there's a few people out there that got these apps, but we also have to understand that, you know, how people do business these days and adapt to it and all that. But I think what we're trying to do today is the BCC has said we have some consideration for a managed vendor program that is in the form of a cooperational program. And they've asked us to iron out those details and made it clear that they're not interested in compensation from the entity that they contract with. They want to gain control, and it's not that we don't have some control over it. They just want to be able to gain control in a manner that we have an entity accountable that we can say, you're not within the terms and conditions of the agreement, you're in default, cure, or terminate.
I do think it's a valid point, though, that Chip brings up, because you can have unintended consequences. In the model he's describing, this type of program, if they're allowed to sign up and contract with the association, it would actually facilitate them being able to operate. So while we may not have many, it sounds like maybe one or two trying to enter the market today, that could, if there's no way to keep them from entering into the contract, could facilitate it for them, make it that much easier for them to do it. So,
But
that may not be an issue. If we're okay with that. I just thought we were trying to keep local businesses in business here, so.
Yeah, that's thinking out of the box, that's for sure. And,
Something to think about.
yeah.
Do we want to start with the master concession agreement?
Yeah,
Just crank through it?
Philip, that's a good point. Let's go through the master concession agreement. Start with number 1, regional beach access locations for pilot program. You okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Hours of operation?
So I guess with something like that, do we need to speak about which one or two locations it
Right.
is?
They're expecting recommendations and they've made suggestions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can do it two ways. We can go down through the list to say the list is good, or we can go down the list and go ahead and define the items that the list is asking for at the same time.
Let's, you wanna do that? Let's do that.
Okay. All right.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
We're gonna go down through the list and define what the list is asking for at the same time.
So we,
So with regional beach access locations, we should decide on which ones we would like to recommend to the
We wanna
county commission.
accomplish, you know, whatever we can accomplish today, and then,
so I heard Mr. Chapman suggest, Commissioner Chapman suggest Inlet Beach and
Yeah.
Walling.
Mhm.
Anybody?
good with that? Okay.
And I know that Commissioner Anderson said that he would like to see one location. I know that they mentioned two as well. If we were speaking operationally from a pilot program, we'll make whatever work as an association. If it was voted on that it was two, that's great, we'll make it work. We're trying to, we have not hired someone yet because this has not gone through and approved, and we're planning on that process, but we are 14 days or less from the first day of season and being on this beach and having everything set up. I just get a little concerned. I would say the association would recommend that it is one location. And again, that's not a hill that I'm willing to die on, but just as far as putting out a good quality product, refining it for 2019 to go to all regional beach accesses if the board wished in 2020, I would recommend one that everyone thought was a good idea.
What was the point of two? Does anybody know?
Well, I understood the association's concern, and I have the same concern. I don't want failure. I think it's gonna take some, a lot of monitoring on my department's, efforts. And so, I had, said, recommend one at previous meetings. Some commissioners wanted to do, all seven, and then I think going to two was a compromise of either doing all or doing one.
Doing all as a pilot or just going
Just-
right into
just-
the full program?
Let's just not worry about a pilot. We think we can make it work, or actually, I think it was done is, Brian, if we tell you to do it, you can do it.
Well, so
Further comments?
So I have heard a
Good
comment
confidence,
from a
really.
vendor throughout this process a while back, that Ed Walleen is really, that there's a high percentage of locals that go to Ed Walleen. So it might not be a really good test site, as opposed to others that are more tourist driven.
Mhm.
Logically, that seems to make sense to me. So, but the Inlet Beach one, pretty tourist driven.
Well, let me
I don't
ask you
know.
this.
Is it?
Let me ask you this. All right, so part of this reason for this program is to mesh the two types of visitors on our beaches. The person that's renting and the person that's not renting. And so would it be smart to include a beach that has a high ratio of non-renting people to renting, let's say renting
Well, I think
equipment
it would be
renting?
good to have a balance, is what I would
Yeah.
say.
And I would say too,
Not
the
heavily
challenge, I
weighted
think,
toward either.
on Ed Walleen, it's a smaller, relatively speaking. Inlet Beach is a large one, and I think it would give your group a more opportunity to really see how a complicated 5-vendor program might work.
Yes, good argument.
I think sounds like two would be the ideal. At this point in time, I wouldn't do seven. I think that would be,
Yeah,
I mean, I know you can do a lot of things, but I think that'd be more
I appreciate it.
of a
And I
challenge.
don't personally, I don't have a problem recommending one and providing the names of two if they're just dead set on two.
Okay.
I would recommend two and prioritize and just say we recommend one, but
That's fine.
here are two, and these are our priorities, 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I would vote for Inlet Beach number 1, and if you can fit in Ed Walleen number 2.
I'm good with that.
Is that
Okay.
good? All right, there you go. There's those two. All right, number 2, hours of operation.
We, as an association, said actual operational hours where someone could come and claim a chair and go sit down to the last amount of time that they could sit in a chair would be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay.
So there would not be any chairs on the beach at 6:50 in the morning.
And what about after 5, if somebody wants to be there for sunset, they're just gonna sit on their towel or their own
Yeah,
chair?
and that may depend. We may say as an association, hey, the young man or young woman who works there, they get lots of tips because they let someone sit for an extra 30 minutes. That's at their own discretion if they wanted to work late. That's generally how each individual company does it now, but we would advertise that your rental period is until 5 p.m. So if we needed them to leave at that point, they know that's what's paid
Okay.
for.
So what about attendant on duty? 1 hour prior, 1 hour after, or what are you gonna say?
That's a good point.
We discussed basically, around 7 a.m. until however long it took. There's no definitive end time to break down, but we said generally that employee would report to the beach around 7 a.m.
Okay.
And maybe a little later we learn, but what we don't want is creating a system, and we've already talked about this with our signage or whatever we have next to where the attendant sits, but we don't want to create a system where we create lines
Yeah.
where everybody at 8 a.m. is there. And one way we combat that is what we've discussed, is we create signage and communication that states that you cannot reserve a chair. Mr. Smith can't come down, get his chair and put all his beach gear in it and leave.
Right.
And that will be clearly communicated throughout. So I think therefore that will eliminate the entire line scenario, and it will take some massaging and communicating. But that's our general thoughts right now.
Okay.
Now, Philip, just to clarify, the attendant would be your employee.
It would be the association.
The association, and they would be compensated by their 10%.
They would be
Uh-oh.
compensated based on an agreement, basically a pay that we agree to pay them per hour, per day, salary, whatever that amount is. And then they would have the opportunity to get tips when they set the chair
But
off.
then
for
you
Mr.
would be
Smith.
reimbursed by what you charge.
The association is a non-for-profit
Right.
association. The intent of that is we cover our cost and build a little bit money in reserves from we have to purchase boxes, liability insurance goes up, cost of drug test goes up more than we thought. So we would basically create, this is our operational cost per this access, and per month we've allotted that much money, okay, which at the end of the year will add up to the total cost for the entire year. Your usage of that beach for that month will be split, and that will be responsible to you as the individual vendor. So we haven't done a process of, it's not a per set fixed cost, it is a percentage cost. Because we talked about this and refined it to where in peak seasons, the number is higher because there's way more sets out there. So if company A had 20% and company B had 80%, just easy numbers, obviously it makes sense. Company B is paying 80% of that cost to be on the beach. So therefore, again, we're not trying to discriminate any vendor, that the smaller guy who has one set there and one set alone says, man, this was cost effective for me, only paid 1% to have my set down there of the total cost of that beach. So
you
because
would
we didn't
settle
want
out
to,
weekly or monthly or?
it would be based on monthly, and we communicate ahead of time what that monthly fee would be, and then we'd make it public record to all vendors of, here's the amount of sets per vendor, and here's your percent of that. And that's all done because they cannot be they have to be on the sheet that the vendor submits before the order takes place. So there is no deleting, and they can't be set up without being on the sheet. So therefore, at the end of the month, they can't complain and say, well, they didn't use it or whatever. They submitted it themselves, which went into our records.
We, in the draft contract, we also have a provision that those, books would be provided to the county.
Sure.
So they could be monitored by us.
Item number 3.
Yeah,
Sorry, skipping ahead.
That's why I asked the question.
So,
I'm gonna get the contract just so you guys can
yeah, that'd be good.
have it.
So
So the reality is you just send them a bill or something or email.
yeah, we've got it
Okay.
pretty spelled out
Okay.
specifically.
So that's item number 3, we got that, we're good.
2, we're good. 3, we should be good.
Okay,
Um,
4, attendance standards.
So they will work for the South Walton Beach Service Association. The entire intent of that is that they do not show favoritism to any vendor. So it is, with the 3 of us working together hand in hand, you will be sure that if we all have a very vested interest, that someone is not going to push my company over theirs. The whole point is that no company is pushed. Exactly, and that would be my rebuttal too, to that earlier statement of, well, let's just let vendors put their own attendant down there. Well, I would say that would not be ideal, because you're gonna have vendors self-serving, hawking people in the parking lots. We're creating a system that beach attendant does not care, because he is not getting paid to sell extra sets. He's getting paid his amount, and he's gonna give great service, and hopefully he gets great tips.
All right, good.
So that would be A, they would be paid from that individual, from that organization. Number of attendants on duty. We're all in the beach service game, so we know what is acceptable. We don't want to understaff, because then that's going to be poor service. If it's a very high volume beach, it may be that we have an attendant there at the peak hours of 9 to 11. That's a second or a third person. But from 11 to 3, there's just one person. That'll be massaging year one. Hey, this one beach was crazy busy. We need to have 3 people all the time.
So no less than one, but you could have more.
There will be no less than one, and we're making it where there's never an instance that there's not someone on the beach.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and I think also, if we just want to talk about just issues of how vendors break rules, which has gotten us a bad name in the community, most of those issues that people get frustrated, whether they're code violations or they're not, most of those issues are because there's not someone on site to fix it. Or the fact that they did it, something happened, wind blew it, whatever the case, somebody else moved it, but no one ever saw it happen, therefore they didn't have the opportunity to correct somebody. That's why I think this plan, if it were to go everywhere in 2020, you have a person with eyes at every single beach that knows the rules. Let's see here.
Communication device.
Everybody will have a cell phone, all the gentlemen will have an iPad that's cellular that shows their list.
Or ladies.
Excuse me,
Yep.
that is so rude to me, I'm sorry, my wife would be very upset with me, I apologize. That individual would have an iPad as well as a phone.
Okay.
Background check,
Mhm.
appearance, customer service expectation, you can add to that list drug screening. We know that's important to the county, we can provide all those records. And we, as an association, are going to pay this individual more than what individuals make working for the 3 of our companies, because it's going to be a privilege to work for the association because we have much higher standards. We are under the microscope and we understand that. Therefore, we're going to make sure and put a very high quality product out there.
Make sure they show up too.
Oh, absolutely.
Important.
You better believe we'll hear about that quick when that doesn't happen.
Sorry, back to communication devices, like Brian said, referenced earlier, you have the ability to swipe credit card and transact business
So,
on that, or will it be the vendor's responsibility?
Okay, so we spoke about that. We waffled back and forth on that. We, as the 3 of us, as vendors, we decided that as an association, we do not want there to be on-site rentals, because that can lead to self-serving, that can lead to some employee that we hired is good buddies with me and my company, and I'm paying him to push people to my company. What we want to do, and also the issue that Mr. Bryan brought up of excess storage and a rotation, and then what happens if it's my company's turn to be up and this person wants 4 sets and they just showed up and we don't have 4 sets, then what happens? Well, then what if I'm storing 6 sets all the time because I don't want to lose my turn, but everybody else is doing that. Now we don't have enough storage spaces in the boxes because we don't want way too many boxes. What we said is keep it the same model it has always been in Walton County, is you choose your vendor that you've used for years. They will provide the stuff. There needs to be no communication with the association other than the association. When your chair is there at the toe of the dune and your name Smith is on the sheet, you get your chair set out. So when somebody comes down and says, I rented through X vendor and my name's Smith, where the heck's my chairs? We say, I'm so sorry, you need to call X vendor back. That's not our problem. We just set it out and it's not on our sheet. X vendor's at fault here. So we want to leave it where we talked about our signage that we would have at our little table where our individual would sit. That would say, if you do not have a reserved order, please call your vendor, your beach service of choice to receive service.
So there won't be walk-ups, is
That-
what you're,
that
what
is-
you're proposing.
That is, in the pilot program, that's what we believe is the most fair and conducive to not setting poor expectations, as well as storage issues, as well as favoritism. So, that's the answer there.
Okay.
So I think we covered all the 4. Work booths, storage facilities, equipment. I know Mr. Bryan mentioned like an actual kiosk. We are indifferent on this. What we discussed was a fold-out table with a nice tablecloth that says South Walton Beach Service Association. They have a beach chair, they have a large umbrella, and we have one A-frame sign that essentially says the rules of what we do, just a very clear, concise message. And that's pretty much it, because what we then do at the end of the day, all of that gets broken down and gets put in a box and nobody sees it.
Not like that.
That's good.
So,
I do too. I would just say, make it look good.
and that's what we do. We'd have a
I'm not worried about
monogram.
the chair and the umbrella, but the table and the tablecloth.
Yep.
You know, that needs to be consistent once it goes beyond a pilot, and it needs to be good quality, you know, attractive.
Okay. Allowable equipment rentals.
6, yeah.
We discussed that the only thing that we would allow from the association is beach chairs and umbrellas only. We don't want to get in the kayak paddleboard game and having racks. Some of our businesses do this. If they want to rent a kayak and a paddleboard, it'll get delivered to their house for the week, and whatever they do with it at that point, they take it to and from the beach themselves.
Sure.
Just beach chairs and umbrellas. Cool.
Especially at a crowded public beach.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Equipment setup standards, equipment condition and identification. The equipment that would be rented would be each individual beach service company's equipment. So if company X has it, it's whatever their company X chair has been that's in good condition and has been for the past several years. So they do not lose their identity as a business.
So would that be part of the association's contract with the vending companies, that they would have to maintain their equipment in good
Yes,
condition?
ma'am. And you'll learn too that companies with very poor equipment, someone gets down to the beach, they're sitting in a chair that's in horrible shape, and next to them is a brand new chair. They don't want to sit in that chair anymore, and they're calling somebody else.
And would that be something that your attendant would take on, is, because sometimes things just get worn out and the
So,
company may not know it, so
we
would they be
discussed that.
informing the vendor?
Exactly. We discussed that. All of our companies right now revarnish our chairs every year. But these employees that would be full-time employees for the association, we would also have them work, and they could contract out to our various companies to just be involved in chair maintenance in off-season. So we get a good individual that works out the entire year and does not, we know that we have, in order to get someone, you have to provide year-round service.
Okay.
Um,
Set up when customer arrives.
Breakdown when customer leaves, it's exactly as it states, is exactly our plan.
Okay.
And like, how do you handle people going up to have lunch and coming back, if they're like?
That's a great point.
How will that be handled?
So what we discussed is that we would be reasonable, and that at lunch, someone has been there for 2.5 hours, the whole family, and they left their stuff in a chair, and it is 12:15 in the afternoon. It's a very good assumption that they went to lunch, and we're willing to let that go because they're going to come back soon. And that's a tough one to tell every person goes to lunch, take all your stuff with you, we're going to pick up your chairs. The main thing we're trying to combat is from the hours of 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., someone coming down, saying I'm Mr. Smith, having their chairs put out, they dump a bunch of stuff in it, or even learn that we're on to them and stay for 15 minutes, dump all their stuff and leave. That's where between us, our actual attendant on site, between our signage, and then if we have a beach ambassador on site, I think that will be a very clear message that they may try to do that day one. And when you see that Mr. Smith came down and he's trying to claim his 12 chairs, it's no different than going to the Bay Restaurant. I'm here for my party of 12. What do they say to you? Oh, is your whole party here, sir?
Exactly.
So the same concept would work, and I think we can do that very gracefully, that it works.
Also, when they arrive, you could ask them to, when they decide to leave for the day, to let you know.
Oh, absolutely, and we
You
know it.
can make that simple. That'd be just
Exactly.
part of the presentation to those people when they come in. Say, let us know when
Exactly.
you're done for the day, because we'll go ahead and remove the setup.
And you'll know too from an attendance mentality, an attendant wants to break down their beach from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., everything there is, so they are out the door at 5 p.m.
They
to
don't
go
wanna
home.
start at 4:45.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem. And another thing is, guess what they want to do? They're smart. When they leave and they're carrying all their stuff, can I help you carry that up? They're looking for a $20 bill.
Yeah.
So they know when they're leaving. Speculative setups. We discussed this. We have zero plan for this. Our only concern would be if we had a very high traffic beach, an inlet beach, for example, a Van Ness, for example, that is highly tourist driven, and it is a lot of people. And again, we don't need to make this a part of it right now, but this is just something that we could discuss in the midst of the pilot program, and probably something going into 2020 is did the pilot program have a lot of issues because at 9 a.m., literally 40 different groups showed up at one time, and they weren't trying to just claim it and leave. They all wanted their chairs, and maybe we had 3 employees, but that still wasn't enough, and we created poor service. Is it, hey, we can set out 10% of the sheet that day, and, you know, code enforcement could look at our sheet. And again, I'm not pushing for that right now, but that's just something, if that led to a poor customer experience. But that's, we don't even need to get into that.
And that's not walk-up, it's just reserved chairs
Correct.
that you're trying to get ahead of the
Correct.
wave.
And one thing to mention too, when someone does come down and they say, I'm Mr. Smith and my family is here and they're not leaving, they'll be taken to their chairs that we know is on the sheet, and it'll be for the certain vending company. We also will have a reserve tag that has their last name on there. So, which would be good communication for them and for code enforcement or anyone else that wanted to know that.
D.
Maximum number of setups per designated beach area. We have not included this in any of our talks. I mean, just frankly, that there's a supply and demand issue, with supply being the amount of space and the demand. And I think that another thing, I don't know if it's on this list, but we will need to talk about if we're going to remove vendor zones or not.
Yes,
Yeah.
the vendor zones will go away in lieu of a max number of sets and a described way of setting up, mainly in the form of access aisles. So what I'll
Sure.
do in preparation for our next meeting, since we've identified the 2 beaches, I will take the physical properties of that beach and offer a couple of solutions for max number of sets
Sure.
and access aisles. I don't want to make it where it's so rigid that you can't set up a beach comfortably, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I do want to make it so that it has those components.
Certainly. And we don't have any intention as beach service companies or as an association to max out every single beach, because guess what? Then I'm going to be sitting in a meeting in next fall talking about how there's too many beach chairs and what are we going to do. Our goal is to service the customers that we have, but I also at the same time want to consider that I would be very wary of putting a max number of sets that we as an association disagreed with. And obviously there's nothing to disagree with because we don't have a number in front of us.
Right.
But if that number were to be lower than we thought was reasonable, or that's even happened in the past, I wouldn't want to get into a situation that now we have tourists upset because they say, I can't go sit in a beach chair that I've sat in for the past 10 years and had no issues with.
Yeah.
So, and again, that'll probably be a discussion for next meeting.
Yeah, it'll be something that we look at hard through
Yes,
the
sir.
pilot program that, you know, like you say, we don't want to have beach not being used.
Sure.
Because we have an artificially low max number of sets that can be
Sure.
used by vendors on that beach.
Yes, sir.
And conversely, we don't want to have it so that it's nothing but vendor chairs.
Yes, sir. Access aisles, I imagine that'll be an agenda for next item that you can
That'll be
break
part
out your
of
plan
that.
there.
Yeah.
Distance between rows, I mean, that one generally works itself out because we don't have any.
All that comes into that.
Yeah, we don't want people to be,
Right.
when you take away the vendor zone, I don't think any of these are gonna be an issue. The problem is in the past, Van Ness or other accesses, you have a very small vendor zone, Blue Mountain, Gulfview Heights, you slam so many umbrellas in a tight area that we have no choice but to touch them all, and then it goes to a bad customer experience. So I think that'll be
Since the
good.
water's edge is already decided, it's
15
already part of the
feet.
code, 15
Yep.
feet.
So we're good there. Clean up beach area, absolutely, that should be a part of the agreement as is right now. Access to beach area for vendor operations, can you clarify that one for me?
That was, should we consider driving on the beach or not? I think to initially get equipment down there and at the end of the year get it off, but in between, items need to come up. You know, at Walton, it's very easy, you can walk up the, drive-on access. At Inlet Beach, a little bit different, there is no drive-on access, but, actually, now that I think about it, Inlet Beach, we can't drive on there to get equipment down there either.
Sure.
So
And I don't,
access to the beach is gonna be over the boardwalk.
and the good thing is as opposed to a Rosemary Beach or a watercolor, where they have hundreds and hundreds of sets and they are one company,
Mhm.
and they do not have the resources to get all of that off without a vehicle in the event of a hurricane. With a public beach, you have multiple vendors that are responsible for their own sets. If that were beginning of the season or a hurricane or whatever, they get their own stuff out, and it's not a mountain to climb.
Right.
The only thing would be boxes, and we always find a way. So we build our boxes now a certain way that can be taken apart easily.
Good.
So I don't think that driving on the beach, it will be an
Yeah,
issue.
okay.
Exit-
VSW Beach Ambassador Attendant. Okay, so the reason for that is two reasons. One, to help monitor the vendor association and make sure they're abiding by the contractual agreement. Second is to monitor and keep the general public in line, because we have the same problem with general public. Not problem, but a problem we have with general public is them coming down to set up their equipment as placeholders in the morning. So we would have a volunteer beach, a paid beach ambassador down there to keep those people in line. And so that's the reason for that. And so that would be part of Walton County's commitment to the contract.
We budgeted for more of those too, didn't we, for this year?
We did not, but we have money available. So we didn't specifically budget for more beach ambassadors, but we have some money that is in the payroll account, right, Jay?
Right, Jay?
And I firmly believe too that this plan that we're doing will work in 2019 and moving in 2020. The beach experience in Walton County will be better than any beach experience, because you will have attendance on site, whether it's a private beach or a public beach, and also you're gonna have a non-biased beach ambassador whose only job is to communicate clearly rules. You know, for example, our beach attendant, it's not in our best interest to go tell the general public that is not renting any equipment, hey, you can't put all of these 10 chairs in a row and leave, because they're just gonna say, well, you're doing this because you wanna make money. We don't do that for that very reason. We can't communicate. So I think that is to achieve your harmony on the beach is, we're getting closer.
We're there.
Okay.
Okay.
Liaison responsibility, hours.
So like I said, we've talked about the beach ambassadors with the BCC. I feel like they feel that is part of this program, and it's something that will be incorporated into it.
I think that's gonna be an important part this year.
Oh, yeah.
I really do.
And question for you, Ms. Sidney, is this is this just a blanket contract? Or
Yeah, so this is standard terms.
this has nothing to do with, okay, we've started to change it up for this purpose.
Right.
Got it.
This is standard. I mean, we did take a look at it, and
Change the
language that wouldn't apply, we took out. But certainly take a look at it, and
Cool.
the idea is basically that we would take a scope of services that details exactly how the beach would be run and just attach it
Yeah.
to this contract.
So think general terms and conditions of an agreement.
Right,
concession
but some of
agreement.
those are very important, like
Mhm.
indemnifying the county, making sure you have certain insurance coverage, things like that we would require of any vendor.
And then specific terms and conditions.
Got it.
Yep,
So this would be agreement, and this would be sub-agreement.
Well, Exhibit A, right?
Exhibit A.
Exactly, yeah.
And then,
yeah, which it even says in there,
Yeah.
the scope of
and
services.
then the sub-agreement, which we mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, given the fact that we cannot make anyone be a member of the association in order to vend on the beach, that's why we came up with just a service agreement. All that service agreement says, and I can get our latest one to Mr. Bryan so he can send it out to everyone to review for our next meeting.
Why don't we do this? So we've gotten through the first part of our mission. And we have some homework. I have some homework to do, and I'll do that and send it out to the committee members. And part of that is you have this revised service agreement that's referenced in this document. And so what I'd like to do is that information needs to go out to the committee members, and we'll make it available to the public. If they would like for it, they can email me or my office. And then we all do our homework, and at our next meeting on the 21st is we continue the refinement process of that, and then at the end, we have completed our mission. Does that sound suitable?
Okay, yep.
So I'll email
Sound
that
good?
to you.
Right,
Yeah,
you
and
me?
Philip, if you will, just
I'll copy
email that, directly to us, not to the other committee members, and
Got it.
we'll circulate everything, just to
Sure.
make
Got
sure
it.
there's no.
So at this
Issues.
point, we're finished with what we need to talk about today?
I think so.
Can I ask one more question, one more thing? And it really goes back to enforcement.
Mhm.
And I know you're gonna get into the weeds on that. So but generally, the first act of enforcement, if something occurs, is the county would go to the association and say, hey, we've got complaints about this. yada, yada, yada. Philip, you guys gotta figure that out.
Yeah, so there's actually two types of code enforcement or enforcement that would happen here, all right? So there would be the general code enforcement of beach rules and regulations. But then there also would be the enforcement, and it's really not code enforcement, it is the contractual agreement monitoring, which will be done by me.
Right, and that's really what I'm focused on, yeah.
Right, and so that's why I say it's, it's important. I wanted one close to my office,
Mhm.
but if I gotta get out and ride around South Walton, so be it. I really enjoy my computer and my
In
phone.
season.
Yeah, and then another component of the beach code enforcement part of it would be people that are not participating in the program, but are trying to vend on that beach.
Yeah.
I would expect that their association would make a complaint.
Yeah.
Hey, got a vendor that's not participating in the program, that is not playing, by the rules out here, he's trying to vend without permission. I need you to come assist us.
So the next level down is, you're gonna have, I'm assuming in your sub-agreement or service level, a set of violations that you would enforce, and that I would think that you get, 1, 2, or 3 strikes, and then you're out. If you have chronic rule violators,
Sure.
I'm assuming you'll have the ability to say, you violated the terms of this agreement.
That's where it comes in, is
Right.
an termination of the agreement
Right.
because you have violated the terms and conditions.
And I would think during the selection process, to be your vendor, or whoever, if you have a chronic violator that you know of over the last couple of years, you're gonna say, or not, I don't know, you tell me, will that not be eligible to
So with
participate
this-
in the program, or?
With this specific pilot program,
Mhm.
we have enabled it where participating vendors cannot break any rules.
But what if there's
in
somebody
regards
that?
to our program, because they are not allowed to set up the chairs.
Right.
The violations occur when the chairs are set out.
Right.
So if company Y is a really bad company, we're kind of putting a wall between how they used to commit problems, because now they have to go through us, and
Right.
we and our guy puts the stuff out.
So you won't use a chronic violator as a criteria to select a vendor
Cannot.
for this program?
If they want to
But
participate.
but you can say, but here's the rules, and if you continue to be a chronic violator, you're
They
out.
hopefully should not, I mean, I
They
genuinely,
won't have the ability to
What
violate.
he's
Yeah.
saying
Right.
is
Right.
because of the association attendant,
Right.
they won't have
They
the
can't.
ability.
they can't put out it'll be in their agreement.
Yeah, but what if they do stuff like they're too close, or they just?
They can't put the
But
chair
they
out.
won't be there.
The tenant's doing it.
Okay.
So the attendant
Their
puts out the
employee.
chairs for
Got
all
it.
3 of our companies. Dave's employee cannot take
Okay.
his set and put it on the beach. He puts it at the toe of the dune. When Mr. Smith
they
shows
use it.
up, our association
Okay.
attendant puts it out.
That's a good point, John, it just clears it up,
Yeah, that's
you know?
good.
Yeah.
It's
I just want to be as clear as
That
possible.
one person is responsible for all
Yeah.
those, and that takes care of it, there's no, so if that person's the issue, then you find another person,
That's exactly right.
that's how that works.
So,
Okay,
one last thing for me. Just to clarify, I'm trying to figure out how this is all working, because there are other changes coming to the beach activities ordinance as well. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, one is that there will no longer be storage overnight, right? Of equipment at the toe of the dune.
We've not discussed this.
Oh,
Yes, so you should be aware
Or
of
you
that,
could store in a box.
but yet it'll be
Ah,
boxed,
okay,
right,
that's a big
correct?
category.
Right.
All right, so
So I'm just saying,
right, so-
everybody needs to know that.
But you have to understand that, when this gets inserted into the code, chapter 22, it has its provisions of it, and provisions of it is that the association would be allowed to have storage boxes on that managed beach.
Well,
But she's referring to other beaches.
So other
In
beaches,
2019.
other beaches may be subject to other areas of the code.
no, I wasn't talking about other beaches. I'm thinking about how this will work when it's implemented. And there was a mention of the toe of the dune. Were you envisioning individual vendors bringing down chairs in the morning and setting them at the toe of the dune, ready
If
for
they
the
needed to
attendant to put
replenish their
out?
stock, or they had too much stock, yes.
But
But
otherwise,
they
it
might
would
have
be
a
in a
box.
And the
they'll be in
box
the
would
box.
be.
Okay, that was my point.
Our responsibility to manage.
Yeah,
That's
box
where
is
it's-
acceptable under the current draft
Mhm.
of the
Okay.
ordinance. And we can talk about this more, but so, in the draft of the ordinance, there's a provision that says, it's basically, 22-60 is all the vendor rules, so all those vendor rules apply. There's language in the contract that says that they have to abide by, chapter 22. But basically in the draft, it says that, the county has the ability to enter into a managed vendor contract for any of its, any property owned by the county, and that managed vendor contract would govern vending on that beach. So, I guess if that makes sense.
Yep.
So all the specifics, we wouldn't necessarily have to add that into the beach activities ordinance, it's just that that's governed by that section, and the managed vendor contract would govern that portion of the beach.
Mr. Chair, I've just been informed that we need to vacate the room within 10 minutes.
We are getting ready to vacate the room.
We went from 4 to
Okay. All right, so we have our plan for next Thursday, the
So
21st.
Phil's going to email us the revised service agreement, and we'll distribute that to the members. I will do a physical assessment and offer up some different solutions to placement, meaning max, space between rows, spaces are allowed sets in a consecutive line or together, and access aisles. And so then we'll use that as a starting point as to establishing those.
Okay.
And you guys take a look at the contract
Right,
language.
draft.
just
Will
so-
you start to implement what we talked about into this, where we have a red line version, or is that
Sure,
gonna
we
go after?
could kind of take what we talked about today and maybe like draft up a scope
Well,
of services.
it usually inserts into it as an exhibit.
It'll be an
Right.
exhibit A.
So we need to understand that these terms and conditions in here are general terms and conditions of any contract that any vendor would enter into with the county.
Got it.
And a lot of them are.
So it's not really gonna change very much.
No.
Yeah.
It'll be
Yeah,
an
so
exhibit
basically
for all this
the-
stuff.
The exhibit, and they're just gonna
Gotcha.
attach it to the.
Yeah, like
Makes
the
sense.
master concession agreement
Mhm.
discussion, we can just kind of fill in what we talked about today, and that would be an exhibit to this contract.
Makes sense.
That is here on the board.
Yes, sir.
Any public comment? 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
2 seconds, did you say, or 2 minutes?
2 seconds. For you, 2 seconds.
Very quickly. Number one, you might consider renaming your company, or whatever the company is, from association to something else that's going to do the management and contractor agreement and avoid the confusion over association. That's one. Number two was empty chairs on the beach. People go for lunch is one event. People love to walk on the beach too, so that's the other one you have to be aware of. I'm sure it's pretty easy to tell. Like you said, if they leave all their equipment there, they've gone and they're coming back. They're not just coming down and reserving a space. The other thing I think you can emphasize more than Sydney had emphasized earlier is the whole process of setting up on the beach is first come, first serve, whether you're renting or you're not renting. Nothing goes on the beach till the person is there, no matter who's supplying the equipment. And I think that's the key to making this whole thing work. The other is mechanics, but the concept that makes it work is first come, first serve.
That's gonna be a big cultural shift for
The-
him,
Well, for the vendors,
Yeah.
for both.
For both.
but more for the vendors than anybody else, I would think.
You'd be surprised how many
I
people
think
get
it's
down
both.
there.
The last thing that I don't know whether you've had it on, or will have it on your sheet or not, your reservation sheet, but you ought to have at least an estimated time of arrival for the client.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Motion to adjourn,
I'll make the motion.
second. All in favor, say aye.
All right,
Aye.
thank you.
We adjourn.
Appreciate y'all's time.
3:35.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.